What's going on, guys? This is going to be another story time episode about riding freight trains. I've been asked a few times for more tales from the road, misadventures, mishaps, and otherwise. And this incident from a few years ago sticks out in my mind, and I figure it might be worth telling. I was heading westbound on the Overland route, which is owned by Union Pacific, goes from Chicago all the way to the West Coast. My goal was to get to Portland, Oregon, but there's a couple points at which the tracks split off where you could wind up in the Bay Area or in LA. So I made it out to the Great Salt Lake, past Ogden, Utah, and realized that I was heading towards the Bay Area. As soon as I hit the Salt Lake, I woke up there and saw that we were crossing the big salty expanse. So I figured I'd have to turn around, stop at the next crew change point, turn back at least to Ogden, and try to catch something heading north through Idaho and onto Portland. So crossed the Great Salt Lake, going really slow on a junk train. I was riding the back of a grainer, get to the other side of the Salt Lake, and we stopped for clearance at a signal. As I was stopped there, the train that we were waiting on crept past, going back where I had just come from. So without even setting foot on the ground, I stepped from my ladder onto the ladder of a passing grainer and headed back to Ogden. I got there and realized I needed to figure out what trains were going to end up in Portland. And the easiest way to know that you're going to the Pacific Northwest is to look for a train that has either evergreen containers if you're looking for intermodal. That's pretty old information. Or the old standby, just look for empty lumber cars, because empty lumber cars are heading back to the Pacific Northwest to pick up more dead trees to be distributed all around the country. So after sweating and getting blistered and getting cleaned up a little bit in Ogden, cleaning up at the public library, I went to wait trackside, and I found a train that had just been built. Was getting put together, that had some empty lumber cars on it, but the workers were constantly walking back and forth on the thing with their lanterns, and I figured if I got on the back of anything, there was not a whole lot of great places to hide, so I would have been caught. I didn't want to worry with that, so I found a place to hunker down, actually in a big wooden crate that was open at the top. Had a bunch of junk railroad parts in it. I scooted those things over. It was about 3 feet tall, so I just got in that, laid out in my sleeping bag at night, and waited for the train to start moving. I had scouted the thing between worker patrols and found that there were a couple rideable grainers a little ways back on the train, and I figured once this thing starts moving, I've got enough time to jump up, throw my sleeping bag in my pack, and then the grainer that I had clocked should catch up to me, should move right past where I'm sitting, and we're talking just 30 yards off of the tracks in this weird crate. So got pretty late, I nodded off, hear the train start moving, jump up immediately, pack what little I was sleeping on into the top of my bag, strap everything down, still bleary-eyed, and make my way to the train. It's mostly empties, so it starts moving fast early. It's moving at a clip, and the car that I had in mind that was rideable and had a good place to hide on the back with no brakes passed me by before I was ready to get on. So got my gloves on and prepared to catch really on the fly at about as fast as I could hoof it on foot. And one of the last few cars on the train was a tanker that I was able to grab. Those have vertical handholds and a small ladder. The vertical handholds, if they've just been painted, are often pretty slick. This was the case, but I managed to catch the thing, sit on the tiny expanded steel platform on the front of this tanker car, and you just sit on the platform with your feet on the ladder facing out and hold on to the two vertical supports. And I figured this thing is likely to stop somewhere for clearance because it's not a very important train. Something's going to be coming the other way or catch up with us from behind. There's going to be an Amtrak, there's going to be an intermodal, something higher priority than this thing. So it'll probably side out soon, hopefully. And then I can run up to the car that I had mentally set aside for myself that's further up towards the front of the train. The train didn't stop for about 4 hours. Temperatures dropped precipitously because it's the desert at night. Even in the summer, it gets pretty cold. And then you're on the front end of a tanker, fully exposed, and the train is moving at a clip that's going like 60 miles an hour. So I got really damn cold pretty fast. The upside was that the scenery was absolutely stunning. Even though it was after midnight when I caught out, the moon was out. You could see the landscape. We went over this really awesome dam through some canyon lands. So we're way up. The water's like far, far below us. And the sky is kind of purple. And the canyons of the American West are gorgeous. So that was nice. It was just me and the two guys up at the front of the train. We're the only people that get to see that particular view at that time. We're the only people on Earth that get to see that place and time. That's my consolation. But I'm getting colder and colder. Train keeps going for 4 hours and eventually comes to a halt on a siding. I prise myself off of the vertical supports I'm holding on to, get onto the ground, and my legs are wobbly and numb from the cold and from sitting. I've had my backpack on this entire time, and what I did to have a modicum of safety was to unclip the straps on my bag and clip myself in with my backpack to these vertical supports. So I had at least some straps in addition to my handholds holding me onto this thing. So I get down on the ground, legs are wobbly, legs are completely numb actually from the knees down. I can't feel my feet at all. I'm wearing wool socks and boots, but the wool is of no avail. I was able to put a rain jacket on to shield myself from some of the wind, my upper body, but my lower body was absolutely frozen. So I ran on ballast, uneven ground, with numb feet and legs that didn't quite work. I was punching myself in the thighs as I ran and screaming David Goggins quotes at myself. Legs don't work, don't matter, fuck it, make them work anyway, don't be a bitch, you know, all the tough motivation shit that some of us live by. And to get up to the car that I'd set aside in my brain for myself was actually pretty far. It was like over a half mile, because when I caught the thing, that car had blown past me, and the tanker that I got on was kind of my last hope of getting on this train the hell out of Ogden. And I knew that it was heading towards Pacific Northwest because there were empty lumber cars up at the front. I didn't want to sit in Ogden for another day. The yard was pretty wide open, fairly exposed. There's just a little bit of sagebrush, like scrub, to hide behind unless I wanted to sit off property, staring at the trains, looking really obvious, or hide in a porta-john, which ain't very fun in the summertime, I'll tell you that. So yeah, I run quite a long way on dead legs, yelling at myself. Managed to get on the back of this grainer before the train starts moving again after the freight that we're waiting for clearance on passes us. Get my bivvy out, a sleeping bag, a sleeping pad, roll it all out, and by the time I've gotten my pack open, which, you know, just has clips, no zippers, clips and a drawstring, I'm able to do that with my hands feeling like broccoli. It feels like I'm wearing mittens. You know, my fingers don't really move, even though I'm wearing just regular gloves. I had to pull the zipper down and then back up again on my sleeping bag by pressing my palms together and grabbing the big fat knot that I'd made on a zipper pull on the zipper. And I'm pretty sure I got the last few inches of pull using my teeth. Got myself all huddled up and realized that I was probably at the beginning stages of hypothermia. Hands weren't working very well, and I started shivering uncontrollably until my body heat and the extra heat generated by the shivering had warmed up the sleeping bag and the mummy liner and the Gore-Tex bivy that I was in. Thankfully, I had the bivy because otherwise the wind, even on the back of that grainer, would have rendered my sleeping bag not very useful. So that's what riding freight trains is actually like some of the times. You get the highlight reels on here, you see people having a grand old time. They're often not going anywhere in particular, and if they don't get there, it doesn't matter. Sometimes you gotta get somewhere, or you've been in one place for long enough that you know you've been noticed by the authorities. The railroad's probably onto you, and your best bet is just to get the hell out of there before you catch any heat. My feet were blistered, had mosquito bites all over me. I think I'd encountered every hateful plant in the American West, all of which are engineered to not be messed with. There's just burrs and spikes and barbs and thorns on everything. I was sunburned from the previous days. I lost my hat, so I just had a do-rag on top of my very bald head, and it was nothing but unpleasant, other than the fact that I get this magical view in the middle of the night while I'm heading into hypothermia. So yeah, riding trains is fun. Riding trains is great, but like all great things, it is sometimes terrible. So if you're heading out, even with all the right gear, even with a fair amount of knowledge, there's every chance that you'll end up in a situation where you're horribly uncomfortable and a bit desperate. So if you're doing short rides and you're doing this just for fun or for views, maybe you can avoid that. But if you make a life of it, or if you even just decide to spend an entire summer doing this thing, that's way different. And it's likely that you're going to be put to the test. Some of us will go through that and still love freight trains. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's how it goes. I've known people that get on a sailboat one time and they fall in love with the sea, and that's the end of that. They just spend the rest of their life on a fucking boat. And some of us catch the same bug with big, insane machines with thousands of wheels going clickety-clack. Hope you're all doing all right. Take care of yourselves and each other, and try to have some adventures out there.